Hello, my name is Matilde, and thank you for having me at this year's research conference at Bangor University. I'm an eclectic existential psychotherapist, I'm an artist, a writer, a Jungian aficionado, and also a paleophenomenologist. So my research here for my PhD is on the emergence of consciousness in early human beings through their drawings via a Jungian lens. Of course, in order to narrow down my research, I'm focusing on Neanderthal at La Pasiega cave in Spain. In order to do this, I have created a whole methodology which I have termed paleophenomenology, and that I describe as an interdisciplinary and rhizomatic framework used to explore the emergence of consciousness in early human beings and their ancient human impulse to create by tapping into their lived experiences while going beyond the representational to explore the material and metaphysical realms. If you want to know more about the history of paleophenomenology and how it came about, there is a video on YouTube about a talk I gave for Creswell Crags on the 24th of March. And of course, this thesis expands from my master by research, and where I'm focusing now always on the needs of and the desire and the compulsion to leave a mark and not on what has been represented. So let's start from the beginning. When they were not aware of the concept of the split, when early human beings became aware of their consciousness and their unconscious rising into a conscious level. So I use the metaphor of the Garden of Eden to explain this shift from a blissful ignorance to awareness of separation. So at the beginning, the state of ignorance is very reactive, and people were using singular specific parts of their brain. So one part was devoted to tool making, for example, and another part to social interactions. But these parts were not communicating with each other. There was no awareness of ego. There was no awareness of self or awareness of thinking. This is very somehow contradictory to the idea of the tree of knowledge, so the difference between good and evil, or the awareness of separation, the awareness of duality in the world. In the very beginning, God separates day and night, or waters from the sky, but it is in the creation of man that there is still this sense of oneness. When we consider then the idea of the snake as the temptation, that of course reminds me very much the parallel between the spirit of God, as in his ruach, or God breathing into a piece of clay. So this breath descending as the kundalini descending and coiling at the base of the spine. And this shift very likely introduced migraines, floaters, hallucinations, visions, dreams, and especially at the meta level, the awareness of thinking, the awareness of an invisible side within ourselves. And this probably created a sense of confusion, chaos, and fear as early humans grapple with their new awareness. How did it feel, and what did it feel to being aware of the very first thought? What did it mean to feel the unconscious rising into a state of awareness? In the beginning was the word we read in the Bible, but from the Greek, of course, logos, which is reasoning. So the act of discerning. In the beginning, there was reasoning, the making sense of chaos. And this reasoning to me emerges as a response to this chaos, providing a tool for humans to make sense of their evolution, their development and their change. And then drawing is a materialization of this Sophia, this wisdom, which takes physical form. This intuition or insight and wisdom, and with the sort of like reasoning personified, it becomes a tool to make sense. Drawing becomes part of an alchemical process of integrating the conscious awareness, a way to externalize and understand what is happening internally. Fixing thinking processes on a rock, visualization of an inner process. On one side, we have this idea of the pure potentiality, as in Sophia, and on the other one is logos, as in the reasoning and as in the doing. And to me, this Sophia and logos is like a dance between Shiva and Shakti. So Shiva is the transformative power, and Shakti this creative energy. And together, there is this interplay of opposites. In electrotechnics, for example, we talk about power, as in voltage, which is a measure as in the difference of potentials, in this holding this differentiation. Edward Edinger, who was a Jungian analyst and a psychiatrist, he wrote about meaning and the etymology of the word consciousness, which is a knowing with, as different from science, which is just knowing. So consciousness implies a relationship, and a relationship, of course, implies at least a duality, the setting of two-ness, the first ever split. It's an inner relationship between the ego and part of the rest of the psyche when the unconscious appears. And in a way, we do have power, or we truly are alive when there is an interplay, an exchange between our conscious awareness and the unconscious well of our inner world. This inner questioning now is fixed into a universal symbolic form on a rock for all to see. And of course, we should question who these all are, since the caves are dark, wet, cold, damp, ugly, and scary places. So in my research, I've imagined 6 stages of separation. At the beginning, the awareness of the invisible. So I become aware that there is an invisible part within me, something that goes beyond the physical body. So there is a visible versus an invisible, the distinction between what is seen and what is felt and known internally, and the visible versus the invisible, as in memories and dreams and thoughts and the awareness of the same. And this is where the psychological awareness of the I begins. And then, of course, this leads to stage number 2, which is the separation of the I and the thou, where we start seeing ourselves as separate from the world around us. I am different from you. This is the I, thou, the full recognition of individuality, and that is the difference, which also leads to somehow rebels, because if I realize that I've got a power over myself, I can decide to say no. And this duality, for example, can be seen in Hindu and Advaita Vedanta texts such as like the Viveka, which is a 1350 book, where it talks about the differentiation between the knowing subject and the known object. And Jung, for example, tells us that the existence is only real when it is conscious to somebody, when somebody can actually see us. Third stage is the question of the invisible in the other. So once the self is differentiated from the other, the next logical question is whether the other, whether human or animal, also contains an invisible part, and recognizing the other interior world and reality. I cannot see your invisible. Can you see mine? And I'm wondering if for example, the first burials were created in order to handle also the invisible of somebody. And this, of course, has got a lot of parallels with the phenomenology of a landscape. Stage number 4 is the symbolizing thought, i.e. the birth of somehow art and understanding space. So as the invisible parts of existence take shape in the mind, the next stage involves manifesting these thoughts and visions into a physical reality. Manifestation, as it is gesticulation, for example, when we talk, is the fixing of the space. And this my space versus your space. So I stop, I leave a mark, I mark the space, and this space becomes a place. And number 5 is the recognition of time and change. When early humans started making their surroundings, they were not just leaving physical traces of existence, but they were also creating an interior space through which they could track time and they witness transformation. Defining space, of course, gives us time, because time is the measure of change in space, and a space that has boundaries and is delimited. So movement or change of position, location through space gives us time, as in the idea of there is a before, there is a now, and hence there is the potentiality of an after. And number 6, the last stage is the emergence of transcendence and the alchemy and transformation. So early humans likely began to glimpse the possibility of something extra, something transcendent, which potentially could have been used as an anchor or an explanation, something beyond the material world, parallel with shamanic studies, alchemical studies, and of course, Jung's reading of alchemy and shamanism. And then, of course, material manipulation, as in drawing, using clay and using material. That is alchemy with a questioning of the unknown. And while adding on top the element of the invisible, we get to shamanism, of course, which is the relationship with the unknown. Of course, as much as you don't know how much of my invisible can be seen, or how much I can see of your invisible, I think that this is now we're on that stage of nakedness, or we are out of the Garden of Eden and out of this kind of like status of blissful ignorance and protection that we lived in. From this point forwards, I think the humans have striven to return to a state of wholeness, to regain the unity that was lost because of separation, regardless whether this is literal, metaphorical, or just a coping mechanism. Same for Advaita Vedanta, most of the Hindu practices, the ideas of this inner bodhisattvas in Buddhism, the Jewish Ruach, the Christian Holy Spirit or Paraclete, Plato's inner diamond, all these stories of prodigal sons coming back, or people getting lost in labyrinths or at sea and needing to find a way home. This is Jung individuation 101. It's the process of this kind of a constant, continual human journey to reconcile the conscious and the unconscious, and to return to a unity, to integrate our own shadow. Now, well, we don't choose one side over the other one, where there are no absolutes, but we learn to live and to stay within the opposite, and we become observers. In the end, we meditate, we pray, we chant mantras, we hug trees, or we make art, or we walk, we fall in love, or we go to therapy, always to find a state of peace within, to make sense of things and of life. Of course, this research led me to a lot of other questions. Is this a cycle that is repeating constantly since the very beginning? Maybe this applies to the human psyche today on a personal and individual level, as it was a species in a collective evolution 78,000 years ago. I'm understanding also now why Jung's insights into the archetypes and the collective unconscious is so helpful to understand a timeless striving for wholeness, and this repetition of imageries or stories and metaphors regardless of when or where we live. Also, how much the outside world has changed so fast, but our inner world is still there, asking the same questions we had 78,000 years ago. I'm wondering also on the importance of the embodied experiences. Maybe we should leave the digital world on one side, and sorry if I'm preaching, but, we should maybe go back to the original making, manipulating, and creating. And as a therapist, of course, I've been questioning the importance of working with different and stretched timelines, not just focusing on my life or on my life plus my parents and plus children, but what is the significance of my journey, my story, my evolution, my pain, my trauma within a larger, longer, and wider and deeper spectra of experiences. So, I'll leave you with basically my email now. So if you would like to ask me more questions besides the Q&A that come after this, please feel free to drop me an email. Or if you would like to have the PDF of the slides, because look at this, there is also some bibliography if you're interested in having a conversation about this. So I've been Matilde, and this was the Alchemy of Awareness. Ciao!